I didn't expect anyone to notice me. Honestly, I had made peace with the fact that I was just a background character in a massive company with over 500 employees. My name is Aria Collins. 26. Single. Recently hired as a junior associate in the finance division of Grant Corporation, one of the most powerful investment firms on the East Coast. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't loud, I didn't wear designer heels or red lipstick like the women on the top floors. I was quiet, observant, and practical. I knew my place, and it was somewhere near the bottom. But every evening, after long hours buried in spreadsheets and approvals, I did something most people didn't know about. I'd stop by the small corner market 2 blocks down, buy a few bottles of water, sandwiches, and granola bars, and bring them back to the plaza right in front of our towering glass building. There, beneath the grand corporate shadow, sat people that the world forgot: George, a retired veteran; Miriam, a soft-spoken woman who once taught music; and Malik, who never spoke but always smiled when I handed him a meal. To them, I was the sandwich girl. I didn't mind. It was the only part of my day that felt real. I never thought anyone inside the building noticed. Especially not him, not Lucien Grant, the CEO, the man who built the empire, a billionaire before 35, known for his ruthless negotiation tactics, his cold stare, and his total disinterest in anything that didn't show up on a balance sheet. I had seen him once from afar. During orientation, he didn't look at people like me. He didn't look at anyone. Really, he observed, calculated, and walked away. So when I glanced up one night while handing George a sandwich and saw a tall figure behind the glass of the top floor, I didn't think much of it. Just another silhouette in the city. But I was wrong. So wrong, because he had been watching. Every evening, from that floor, through that glass. And then, one Thursday afternoon, everything changed. I was at my desk, typing up a report for my supervisor, when I felt the air shift. You know the feeling? Like a drop in pressure. Or when someone steps into a room and everything goes quiet. I looked up, and there he was. Lucien Grant, standing right there, at my desk. My fingers froze, my breath caught. For a moment, I thought I had hallucinated him. But he was real. 6'3", dark gray tailored suit, black tie, ice blue eyes, expression unreadable. Aria Collins, he said, not a question, but a statement. I nodded, too stunned to speak. How long have you been with us? 3 months, I replied, my voice smaller than I wanted. He tilted his head slightly. Do you enjoy the work? I blinked. Yes, I mean, it's challenging. In a good way. He studied me for a second longer, then nodded. Keep it up. And just like that, he turned and walked away. I sat there, heart pounding, trying to figure out what the hell just happened. My coworkers stared at me like I had been chosen for some sacred ritual. That night, I followed my usual routine. Corner market, sandwiches, water, back to the plaza. George was there, along with Miriam and Malik. Even an sandwich angel. George grinned, accepting the bag I handed him. I laughed softly. Even an troublemaker. We sat for a moment, chatting, as they ate. Then I felt it, that same shift, like being watched. I looked up. This time, the figure behind the glass wasn't just a silhouette. It was him, Lucien Grant, watching me, unmoving. I stared back for a few seconds, then lowered my gaze, pretending it didn't matter, but it did. The next day, he walked past my desk again. Didn't stop, just glanced, just enough to make my heart stumble. The day after that, I found a post-it note on my monitor in tight, clean handwriting. You left one sandwich behind yesterday. I didn't know whether to laugh or panic. He had watched long enough to notice how many bags I carried. Why? He didn't speak to me again for a week. Then, just as I thought maybe it had been a fluke, I got a notification. Internal calendar invite. Subject: meeting. Location: 49th floor, private. Attendees: Lucien Grant, Aria Collins. I clicked it 10 times. Sure it was a mistake. But it wasn't. At 3 p.m. sharp, I walked into the private elevator, heart racing. When I arrived, His assistant gestured to the glass conference room. He was already inside, standing by the window. "Miss Collins," he said as I entered. "Please, sit." I did. He didn't. He turned, hands in his pockets. "I've been watching you." I froze. "Excuse me." "Every evening, outside." My throat went dry. I was just helping." "I know," he said, "but I want to know why." I swallowed. "Because they're human. Because I can. Because no one else does." He nodded slowly. "Do you do it for recognition?" "No." "For guilt?" "No." "Then why?" "Because if I were on the sidewalk instead of in this chair, I'd hope someone would do the same for me." Silence. Then he sat across from me, leaned forward. "Do you know how rare that is in this building?" "What is?" "Kindness without agenda." I didn't know what to say. I didn't understand why I was here. "Why me?" He folded his hands. "I need someone like you." "For what?" "For something bigger, something real." I should have been thrilled, but I wasn't. I was terrified. That night, when I went outside with the sandwiches, he was there, not behind the glass, on the sidewalk, in a suit that probably cost more than my yearly salary, watching me. "You don't have to be here." I told him. "I do," he replied. And then, without hesitation, Lucien Grant knelt beside George and handed him a bottle of water. That moment, that small, quiet moment, was the first crack in the ice around him, and the first crack in the wall I had built around myself. Because for the first time, the billionaire wasn't looking down. He was right beside me. The next few days were a blur. He didn't come back to the sidewalk, but I knew he was watching again. I felt it, every time I handed out food, every time I knelt beside Miriam or handed Malik a bottle of water. I felt his eyes on me. And yet, he said nothing, no messages, no invitations, just silence. Until Friday. I had just finished reviewing some invoices when an unfamiliar number popped up on my screen. "You're going to need better shoes if you're going to keep walking that much." My eyes widened. I stared at the message, stunned. Then another one followed. "Meet me outside the building at 6. Wear something warm." I had so many questions. What did he want? Why was he doing this? Why me? But the truth, I was already putting my coat on. At 6 sharp, I walked out the front doors and there he was, standing beside a sleek black car, hands in his coat pockets, expression unreadable. "Aria," he said, opening the door for me. "Get in." "Where are we going?" I asked cautiously. "You'll see." The car ride was quiet at first. City lights flashed past us in streaks of gold and red. Finally, I turned to him. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I've built a world that doesn't feel real anymore," he said simply. "And then I saw you. And what you do. And I realized I've been missing something important." I looked away, unsure how to respond. We stopped in front of a warm little shop tucked into a quiet street. "Come on," he said. Inside was a boutique shoe store. Not designer, not flashy, but filled with practical, sturdy, beautiful shoes. He didn't say a word as he nodded toward the shelves. "Pick a pair." "Lucien, it's not charity," he interrupted. "It's appreciation." I hesitated, then picked the pair I had eyed for months but could never afford. As we stepped back into the cold, new boots in hand, I whispered, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," he said. "Just keep doing what you're doing." That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart thudding. What was this? Attention, curiosity, or something else entirely? Monday came, routine returned, but nothing felt the same. At noon, my supervisor stopped by my desk. "Grant wants you on the quarterly cost review team," she said, effective immediately. My mouth dropped. "Me? Yes, you've been requested." Requested? By him. That project was led by executives, people with six-figure salaries. And suddenly, I was in. The meetings were intense, high pressure, fast-paced. I kept my head down and worked harder than ever, and every now and then, I'd catch Lucien looking at me across the room. Not like a boss, like something else, something I couldn't name. One evening, as I was leaving the building, it started to rain, hard. I pulled my coat tighter, clutching the paper bags in my arms. I didn't want the food to get soaked. But I had made a promise. The sidewalk was emptier than usual. Miriam wasn't there. George was gone. Only Malik remained, sitting under the overhang, drenched but smiling faintly when he saw me. "Told you not to come in this weather," he muttered. "And miss our dinner date," I joked, handing him a sandwich. He grinned. I was about to leave when I saw the headlights. The same black car pulled up. Window rolled down. "Lucien, get in," he said. "You're soaked." "I'm fine." "You're shivering." I hesitated, then got in. The warmth of the car hit me like a wave. We drove in silence for a while before he spoke. "You know you don't have to do this every night." "I know, but you do." "Yes." He looked over at me. "Why?" "Because they matter." He didn't argue, didn't scoff. He just nodded slowly. "You're unlike anyone I've ever met." My breath caught. I didn't know what to say to that. And then, just before I opened the door to leave, he said something that made my heart stutter. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me." "Why?" I asked, softly. "Why would you offer that to me?" "Because," he said, "you remind me that I still have a soul." And just like that, he was gone again. But I was changed. Completely, utterly, irreversibly. The next morning, everything felt louder. The hum of the elevator, the clack of heels against marble floors. Even the whispers around the coffee machine seemed sharper. Like everyone was speaking just above a whisper but somehow still too loud. I sat at my desk, staring at the blinking cursor on my screen, unable to focus. Every few minutes, I glanced toward the elevators, half expecting him to walk through the door again. He didn't, not that day, not the day after either. But his absence made more noise than his presence ever had. It wasn't until Thursday evening that I saw him again. I was walking down the hallway toward the exit when I heard footsteps behind me. Steady, deliberate. I didn't have to look to know who it was. "You didn't ask for anything," he said behind me. Not quite a question, not quite a statement. I stopped and turned. "I told you I don't need anything." "Everyone needs something," he replied. "Even you. Especially me," he added after a pause. That caught me off guard. He stepped closer. "But the difference is, you give even when no one gives to you." "That's what I don't understand." I shrugged. "Maybe you're not supposed to. But I want to," he said softly, and just like that, I was back in the passenger seat of his car, this time headed somewhere I didn't know. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Someplace quiet," he answered. 20 minutes later, we arrived at the waterfront. The city lights sparkled across the water like stars had fallen into the harbor. He led me to a bench. We sat in silence for a long while. Then he said, "When I was 15, my father died. Stroke. Out of nowhere." I looked at him, surprised. He never talked about his past. I had to grow up in one night. My mother didn't know how to run the business. Our board tried to cut her out. I fought them. I learned everything. Finance, strategy, law. I stopped being a teenager. He looked out over the water. "Since then, I've only trusted numbers. Because people disappoint, people lie. But numbers, they don't." I was quiet, letting his words settle between us. "So why me?" I asked finally. He looked at me. "Because you give without numbers. Without expectations. And it terrifies me." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to being the one who terrified someone like him. "Lucien," I began, but he cut me off. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." That night, he didn't take me home. I walked, not because I didn't want to be near him, but because I needed space to breathe. Because for the first time, I realized I was no longer invisible, and that someone like Lucien Grant had seen me, not just seen, but noticed. I didn't sleep much that week, and neither did he, apparently, because on Monday morning, I found a small envelope on my desk. Inside, a handwritten note, 3 words, "Still watching, L." That should have unnerved me. It didn't. It made my heart skip. I tucked the note into my purse and got to work. But something had changed. My name was being whispered more. I was called into meetings I hadn't even known were happening. And always, I felt his presence nearby. Sometimes near, sometimes far, but never gone. One afternoon, as I was walking out of the cafeteria, I saw him speaking to the CFO. He turned just slightly, just enough to meet my eyes across the room. One glance, one heartbeat, and then he turned back. I knew something was happening. Something dangerous. Something that couldn't be undone. But I didn't know how to stop it. Or if I even wanted to, I should have known things wouldn't stay quiet for long. Nothing about Lucien Grant ever remained in the shadows for too long. And yet, part of me had convinced myself that whatever existed between us could stay tucked away in stolen glances and late-night drives. But secrets, especially the ones that come wrapped in tension and uncertainty, have a way of unraveling themselves. It started with whispers, nothing direct, just the subtle shifting of eyes when I walked into a room. The lingering glances from coworkers who suddenly seemed to realize I wasn't invisible anymore. People who once ignored me now smiled too brightly or avoided eye contact altogether. I knew why, I just didn't want to admit it. Then came the rumors, soft-spoken but sharp-edged. Did you see her get into his car last night? They say he requested her for every project this quarter. It's always the quiet ones. I tried to ignore it, bury myself in reports and numbers and late hours. But no amount of work could drown out the fact that people were talking. About me, about him, about us. And Lucien, he didn't seem to care. If anything, he seemed amused, like the idea of people speculating about something he hadn't even defined made him curious. One morning, I was sitting at my desk, sipping coffee and trying not to overthink everything, when his voice broke through the chaos. "Aria," he said, standing beside me like he hadn't just disrupted the entire energy of the floor. "Walk with me." I stood slowly, heart pounding, aware of every eye tracking our steps as we made our way toward the executive elevator. Once inside, the doors closed, and we were alone. "People are talking," I said finally, voice quieter than I intended. "They always do," he replied. "They think I'm sleeping with you." "Are you?" he asked. Tone unreadable. I turned to him, jaw tight. "Lucien." He gave a small smirk but said nothing else. The elevator dinged, and we stepped into his office. The moment the door shut behind us, the air changed. "You're playing with fire," I whispered. "I know. This could cost me everything." "What do you think it's costing me?" he asked, stepping closer. "Do you think I don't know the risks?" "You don't act like it. Because I've already decided you're worth it." I stared at him, stunned. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not?" "Because you're my boss. Because you're a billionaire. Because I'm not built for this world you live in." He reached out and took my hand gently. "Then I'll build a space where you are." I shook my head, trying to fight the tears that threatened to rise. "Lucien, I don't want to be someone's secret or someone's downfall." "You won't be," he said, "not if I do this right." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But fear doesn't care about desire. Fear plants itself in your spine and whispers all the reasons you should run. And yet, I didn't. That night, I found myself in his penthouse again. It wasn't planned. One minute I was standing in the rain, waiting for the bus. The next, his car was pulling up beside me. Door already unlocked. He didn't say a word when I got in. Just drove. When we arrived, the city lights spilled into the windows like spilled champagne. He poured us wine, offered me a blanket, and we sat in silence. The kind that says everything without saying a word. "When did this start for you?" I asked finally. "The moment you knelt on the sidewalk with a bag of sandwiches and smiled like the world hadn't failed you." I laughed softly, surprised. That long ago? Longer, probably. I just didn't know what to do about it. And now I still don't know. But I want to figure it out with you. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't touch. But I left with a different kind of intimacy wrapped around me. One that felt heavier than skin. One that lived under the bones. The next day at work, something changed. HR sent out a memo about professional boundaries and company conduct. It wasn't directed at me, but I felt every word like a spotlight. When I entered the conference room for a meeting later that afternoon, the tension was thick enough to cut. And when Lucien walked in, everything went silent. He sat beside me like nothing had changed. Like the weight of 1,000 assumptions didn't hang between us. But I saw the way the others looked at me. And I hated it. I wasn't a climber. I wasn't someone using someone else's power to get ahead. But I knew that's what they thought. And Lucien, he just sat there, calm, collected, unmoved. After the meeting, I pulled him aside. "You need to back off," I hissed. "Why?" "Because they're blaming me. Because I don't want to be the girl who slept her way to the top." He frowned. "You think that's how I see you? It doesn't matter how you see me. It matters how they do. You're stronger than this. I shouldn't have to be." He went quiet, and for once, I saw something like regret in his eyes. "I never wanted to make your life harder. But you are." That night, I didn't go to the market. I didn't hand out food. I didn't do anything but sit in my tiny apartment and cry. Not because of Lucien, not because of the whispers, but because I hated how much I cared. The next morning, he wasn't in the office. Nor the next. On the third day, I found a package on my desk. No label, just my name. Inside was a simple notebook. Blank pages. And a note: "When the noise is too loud, write the truth. L." I held it in my hands for a long time before tucking it into my bag. That afternoon, during a board presentation, the CFO asked for my insight. Me, not my manager, not my director, me, and as I stood, heart racing, I saw Lucien walk in quietly and take a seat at the back of the room. He didn't say anything, just watched. I delivered my report, answered every question, and when I sat down, he gave me the smallest nod. And somehow, that was enough. Later that week, I found him waiting for me outside. "Walk with me?" he asked. I nodded. We walked in silence down a quiet street. "I don't know how to protect you without caging you," he said finally. "Then don't protect me, just stand beside me." He looked at me, and for the first time, I think he truly understood what I needed. Not a rescuer, a partner. And for a brief moment, the world felt possible again. Until the photo surfaced, a blurry shot of us outside the building. Too close, too late at night. It hit the internet by morning. The headline was cruel. "Grant's girl, CEO's mystery woman revealed." My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. My email exploded. My reputation cracked. I walked into the office with my head held high. But inside, I was crumbling. Lucien met me in the hallway. "We'll handle this." "No," I said, "I'll handle it." "Aria, number more hiding." I walked into HR myself. Scheduled a meeting. Told him the truth. Told them I had never received special treatment. Never abused my position. Never crossed a line until the moment it crossed me. And then I left the room before they could decide what to do. Lucien found me in the stairwell hours later. "You didn't have to do that alone," he said. "But I did," I replied. "Because if I'm going to survive this, I have to know I did it on my terms." He pulled me into a hug. Tight, fierce, real, and in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. This wasn't just some fling, some power trip. This was something terrifying and beautiful and very, very real. And if I wasn't careful, it could break me. But maybe, just maybe, it could also build me into someone stronger than I ever thought I could be. I thought that telling the truth would bring relief. That once I laid everything bare, the whispers would fade, the looks would stop, and life would slowly settle back into something close to normal. But the truth doesn't always calm the storm. Sometimes, it just changes the direction of the wind. After I spoke with Aria, the silence was deafening. For the first time, no one looked at me. Not with curiosity, not with judgment, just silence. As if I'd become too real to gossip about. As if they didn't know what to do with a woman who refused to play by the expected rules. And Lucien was different too. Not distant, but quieter, watching more than speaking, showing up in ways that didn't make noise, like sending a car when it rained. Or having fresh coffee at my desk when I stayed late. Always with no note but always unmistakably him. But the line between protection and possession was starting to blur. And I didn't know how to stop it. One evening, as I was finishing up reports, my computer pinged. A meeting invite. From Lucien. 11 p.m. My place. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but my curiosity won. When I arrived, he was waiting in the living room, dressed down in a black shirt. sleeves rolled up, barefoot. He looked more like a man than a CEO. More like Lucien, less like Grant. "You came," he said. "You asked," I replied. He handed me a glass of wine and motioned for me to sit. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, voice lower than usual. I braced myself. "The board is unhappy," he continued. "Some of them are using our relationship as leverage. They're saying I've compromised the integrity of the company." My heart dropped. "Are you in trouble?" "Not yet," he said, "but it's coming." I set the wine down. "Lucien, if you want to walk away from this, I'll understand." "Do you want me to?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "No," I whispered, "but I don't want to be the reason you lose everything." "Aria," he said, stepping closer, "I've spent years building something that made me powerful but not happy. You're not the reason I could lose it. You're the reason I care if I do." That night, for the first time, he didn't just hold me. He leaned into me like he was the one searching for shelter. And I gave it to him. The next morning, he called an emergency board meeting. He didn't tell me what he was going to say, but I knew it would change everything. I spent the day pretending to work while my stomach churned with uncertainty. Hours passed. No messages, no updates. Then at 5 p.m., my phone rang. It was him. "Meet me downstairs." When I stepped outside, he was leaning against his car, suit jacket off, tie loose, hair slightly messy like he'd been through a war. "How did it go?" I asked. I told him the truth. He said, "Told them I was in a relationship with an employee. Told them I wouldn't apologize for it." My heart stopped. "Lucien." And then I offered them my resignation. The air left my lungs. "What?" I gave them a choice. Accept it and lose the man who's doubled profits for the past 3 years. Or back off and let me run my company like a human being instead of a robot. And they backed off. I stared at him, stunned. "You risked your career for me." "No," he said. "I risked my career for us." For the first time, I didn't argue, I just reached for his hand. But just when I thought the worst was over, the backlash came. Not from the company, not from the media, from the one place I hadn't expected: my family. My sister called first. "What are you doing, Aria? Do you know how this looks? Dating your boss, a billionaire? People are talking. Let them," I said. "It's my life." "You were always the smart one," she said, bitterness laced in her voice. "Guess money changes everything." My mother's message was colder. "I hope you know what you're doing." But did I? Some nights I wasn't sure. But every time I looked into Lucien's eyes, every time he touched my hand without hesitation, I remembered why I chose this. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. Still, the pressure built. At work, I had to be twice as good just to be taken seriously. Every success was questioned, every mistake exaggerated. And Lucien, he saw it. He started pulling back in public, giving me space. At first, I was grateful, but then I began to feel the distance. Like he was trying to protect me by removing himself. One evening, after a long board prep session, he walked me to the elevator. We stood there in silence. The doors opened. I stepped in, but before they closed, I turned. "Are you going to keep stepping away from me?" He met my gaze. "I'm trying to shield you." "Then stop." "I don't need a shield. I need you beside me." He didn't say anything, just nodded. The next day, he did something bold. During a major executive meeting, he openly asked for my input on strategy. Not as a formality, but like he valued it. Like I belonged. The room went silent. Then, slowly, the dynamic shifted. People began responding, listening, accepting. It was a small moment. But for me, it was everything. Weeks passed. The storm began to die down. Not because people forgot, but because they got bored. Scandals fade, but people don't. And Lucien and I, we remained. Stronger, clearer, but not without scars. One night, as we lay on his penthouse couch, city lights flickering outside the window, I whispered, "Do you ever regret it?" He looked at me. "Regret what?" "Choosing me. Choosing this." He sat up, pulled me close. "Aria, every empire I've ever built, every dollar I've ever made, none of it compares to knowing you're in my life. I don't regret it. I only regret not finding you sooner." And in that moment, I knew, this wasn't just a chapter in my story. It was the beginning of something deeper, something lasting, something neither of us saw coming, but both of us were willing to fight for. I used to think that the hardest part of falling in love with someone like Lucien Grant would be navigating the whispers, the headlines, the sheer imbalance of power. But I was wrong. The hardest part is learning how to hold someone who's never let themselves be held. Lucien knew how to run companies, conquer markets, and destroy competitors in boardrooms with nothing but a few cold, calculated words. But when it came to vulnerability, to feeling things, he was still learning to breathe in that space. And I somehow had become the one he trusted with that lesson. But trust is a fragile thing. One wrong move, and everything can fall apart. It happened one Friday morning. I was heading into the building when a woman stepped out of a sleek black town car in front of the office. She looked polished, commanding, and unmistakably familiar. I didn't recognize her at first. But the way the security guard greeted her, the way people whispered as she walked past, I knew she wasn't just anyone. Her name was Victoria Hale, CFO of a rival firm, and Lucien's ex-fiancée. I found out who she was because she walked straight past me and into Lucien's office without so much as a glance. I shouldn't have cared, but I did. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus, but my stomach was twisted in knots all morning. At noon, I received a message from Lucien, "Join me in the conference lounge." Now, when I arrived, she was still there, standing beside him, smiling. He looked up as I entered, and something in his expression shifted, like he had forgotten how to arrange his face when I walked into the room. "Aria," he said smoothly, "this is Victoria Hale." "Victoria, Aria Collins." She extended a hand with a sharp smile. "You're the one." The words hit harder than I expected. "Excuse me, the one who cracked the CEO code. Congratulations." Her tone was polite, but her eyes, they were dissecting me. I shook her hand, firm, calm. "Nice to meet you. Lucien and I were just discussing a potential merger," she added, casually looping her arm through his. "Like old times." Lucien said nothing. I nodded. "I'll let you two catch up." And I walked out before either of them could stop me. I didn't cry. Not then. Not at my desk. Not in the bathroom stall. But later that night, in the silence of my apartment, I allowed the tears to fall. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust what history could still mean to someone like him. That weekend, he didn't call, didn't message, didn't show up, and by Monday morning, something in me had cooled. I wasn't angry, just numb. When I arrived at work, everything felt normal, too normal, until I opened my inbox and saw the invite, "Board presentation, Wednesday 3 p.m., required attendance." My name was on the presenter list, but Lucien's was missing. I rushed to his office. The door was locked. His assistant looked nervous. "He's in an off-site meeting," she said. "He'll be back tomorrow." I turned, heart racing. Why would he miss this? Why would he step back now? The next 2 days were a blur. I buried myself in data, charts, forecasts, and when Wednesday came, I stood in that boardroom and delivered the most important presentation of my life. Alone, no Lucien, no support, just me. When I finished, the room clapped, slowly, respectfully, but all I felt was hollow. That night, he finally called. I didn't answer. He showed up at my apartment 20 minutes later. I opened the door and stared at him. "Where were you?" I asked. "I needed space," he said. To think or to run." He stepped inside. "Victoria means nothing to me anymore. She showed up uninvited. I didn't ask her to come. But you didn't ask her to leave either. I didn't want to disrespect a potential business deal. So you chose the deal over me." He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't know what to do. I panicked. I looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time, I saw the cracks, the fear, the guilt. "You don't get to disappear when things get hard. Lucien, not with me." "I know," he whispered. "I'm not used to this. I'm used to control, to logic. But you make me feel everything I've been avoiding." I stepped closer, then stop avoiding it. And for a moment, he did. He wrapped his arms around me and held on like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. We didn't fix everything that night, but we took the first real step. Over the next few weeks, things shifted again. Lucien became more present, more vocal, more invested in us, and slowly, the walls between us began to crumble. He invited me to executive retreats, not as his date, but as a contributor. He introduced me to board members as a strategic voice. He stopped trying to shield me, and instead, stood beside me. And then, one night, he did something I never expected. He gave me a key to his penthouse. "You don't have to move in," he said, "but I want you to know the door is always open." I took the key, and I knew exactly what it meant. A week later, everything changed. Again, I had just wrapped up a late-night strategy meeting when the fire alarm went off. Not in the office, at Lucien's building. I rushed to his place. Fire trucks, police, smoke billowing from a third-floor unit. His penthouse untouched, but the air was thick with chaos. I found him standing outside, barefoot, a blanket over his shoulders, talking to a firefighter. When he saw me, his eyes softened. "I'm okay," he said. "It was electrical, not targeted, just bad timing." I didn't care. I threw my arms around him, and for the first time, he didn't flinch. He just held me, like he needed it too. That night, I stayed, not because he asked me to, but because I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. And as I lay beside him, I realized something that terrified me more than any gossip, scandal, or boardroom whisper ever had. I was in love with him. Truly, deeply, irrevocably, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. Because for the first time, I knew he felt it too. I used to think that love, once confessed, would be the end of uncertainty. That once two people finally said the words, really said them, everything afterward would come easier, safer. That love was a destination you arrived at, and not the beginning of an entirely new terrain filled with its own storms and fault lines. But being with Lucien Grant was like learning how to breathe on a different planet. The rules were different, the gravity was stronger, and just when you thought you understood your place in the atmosphere, the ground would shift beneath you again. After the fire, everything became oddly domestic. Lucien, the billionaire who once lived by a Google Calendar tighter than a Fortune 500 merger timeline, started cooking breakfast at 6 a.m., badly, but with effort. He'd burn toast, undercook eggs, and somehow spill coffee even with a cup designed not to spill. But every morning, he'd try again, and I'd smile, because this man, this cold, untouchable CEO, was learning how to live for someone other than himself. We still didn't tell the world. We didn't have to, they already knew, but we stopped pretending. At work, he didn't avoid me, he didn't flaunt me either. We existed in that fragile, invisible current between professionalism and something far more dangerous. And it worked, until the letter arrived. It was a Thursday, a long one. I had spent 6 hours in back-to-back meetings, and my inbox was still a battlefield of unanswered messages. When I returned to my desk, there it was, a plain white envelope, no return address, no name, just the word "confidential" typed in black, all caps. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, and one sentence: "You are being watched." At first, I laughed. A prank, some pathetic scare tactic from an anonymous keyboard warrior. But then I noticed the postmark. It wasn't local. It was from Washington, D.C., and the envelope, it had a company watermark, one I recognized. The Department of Corporate Oversight, a government agency that usually only involved itself in companies under federal review. My stomach turned. I rushed upstairs, straight to Lucien's office. He was on a call. But the second he saw my face, he ended it. What happened? I handed him the letter. He read it once, then twice, slower the second time. His jaw tightened. "Where did you get this?" "It was on my desk." "Did anyone else see it?" "No." He folded it carefully. "You need to stay calm. Lucien, this is a federal agency. Why would they be watching me?" "They're not watching you," he said. "They're watching me. You're just the closest thread to pull." I blinked. "Is this about us?" "It's about everything," he said grimly. The merger, the board, Victoria, someone's trying to destabilize me from the inside. And they're using you to do it. I felt cold all over. What do? We don't panic, he said, we plan. That night, he didn't go home, he stayed in the office, working with legal teams, compliance officers, and his most trusted advisors. I stayed too, because I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. At midnight, he finally leaned back in his chair and looked at me. If this gets worse, they'll dig into everything, your finances, your background, your family, everything. I don't have anything to hide. That doesn't matter, they'll twist whatever they find. I walked over and took his hand. Then let them dig, I'm not afraid. He didn't say anything for a long time. But the way he looked at me said everything. This wasn't just about a relationship anymore. This was war, and someone wanted to tear him down piece by piece. Over the next few days, things escalated quickly. The department sent an official request for documents, emails, internal reports, and while it was all under the guise of a routine audit, everyone knew it wasn't. Whispers turned into strategy meetings. Board members started showing up unexpectedly. And Lucien, he became colder, sharper. The version of him that built empires was back in full force. And I hated it, because I miss the man who tried to flip pancakes with too much confidence and too little skill. I miss the man who whispered to me after midnight that he wished he'd met me when he still believed in dreams. One night, I confronted him in his office. You're shutting me out. I'm protecting you. No, you're pushing me away. It's the same thing. No, Lucien, it's not. He stood and turned away. I can't be distracted right now. Then what am I? He froze. The silence that followed was brutal. But then he turned. You're not a distraction. You're the only real thing in my life. And that's exactly why they're using you to hurt me. I walked to him slowly. Let them try. I'm not going anywhere. But deep down, I wondered how much longer I could hold on before the pressure cracked something inside me. The investigation went public 2 weeks later. A leaked article, a photo of me walking into his apartment. The headline, CEO's lover at center of federal probe. Overnight, I became a symbol of scandal, of manipulation, of favoritism, and worst of all, of vulnerability. HR called me in. You should consider taking leave. They said, just until this dies down. No, I replied, I've done nothing wrong. I stay. They looked at each other, concerned, but I held my ground. Until I couldn't, until I received the second envelope. This one wasn't typed, it was handwritten. If you really love him, leave. I stared at the words until my vision blurred. I didn't show Lucien, I didn't tell anyone. I just walked to the rooftop that night and cried until my chest ached. And when I went home, I sat in the dark and made the hardest decision of my life. I packed a bag, wrote a note, and left. I didn't go far, just enough to disappear. I didn't answer his calls, didn't read his messages. I needed space, not to stop loving him, but to remember who I was outside of him. It took 5 days. On the 6th, he found me, at a small lakeside cabin my uncle used to own. He knocked on the door like a man who hadn't slept. When I opened it, he didn't say anything, just stood there. You left, he said finally. You pushed, I replied, because I was trying to protect you. And I needed to stand on my own. We stared at each other for a long time. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out another envelope. This came yesterday, he said. It cleared you, completely. I opened it. A federal letter, cleared of any suspicion, no wrongdoing found. And you? I asked. They're still looking, but I don't care. Lucien, number. Listen to me. I've spent my whole life building a fortress, a kingdom, but it means nothing if you're not in it. He stepped closer. So if you'll have me, scandal and all, I want you, not just in the shadows, not just behind closed doors, but everywhere, forever. I looked at him, eyes full of everything we'd survived. And then I whispered, okay. He kissed me, and this time, I didn't feel like we were risking everything. I felt like we were finally claiming what we'd already fought so hard to keep. I thought returning meant peace. That after everything we'd gone through, the investigation, the scandal, the sleepless nights spent wondering who was coming after us next, We could finally breathe again. I was wrong. The storm hadn't passed. It had just moved underground. A week after I came back to the city, Lucien looked different. Not visibly, not to anyone else, but I could feel it. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. He kissed me goodnight, but sometimes his hand trembled like there was a secret he was still holding back. I asked him once, "What aren't you telling me?" He looked at me for a long time. "I'm trying to protect you." I had heard those words before, too many times, but this time, I didn't press, because something told me that the truth wasn't just dangerous, it was explosive. It came out the following Monday. A press release, a statement from the board of Grant International. They were conducting a vote of confidence in Lucien's leadership, which, in corporate language, meant one thing: they wanted him out. I was in the office when I saw it. The headline flashed across my screen like a slap in the face. Lucien Grant faces internal revolt. My phone buzzed a second later. His name. I picked up. Aria. His voice was tight, controlled. "Come to the penthouse now." I didn't ask questions. When I arrived, he was in the middle of a war room, papers everywhere. Legal teams on call, trusted allies at the table. And Lucien, at the center of it all, was the eye of the hurricane. Calm, cold, but I knew that calm wasn't peace, it was strategy. He turned to me and dismissed the room. When the door closed, he sat down. "They've been planning this for months," he said, "ever since we went public." "Because of me?" "No," he said, "because I made 'em nervous. You just gave them the excuse." I sank into the chair across from him. "What happens now?" "I fight," he said simply, "but this isn't like before. This isn't about media spin or compliance reports. This is personal. They want my company, my name, everything I've built. Then let's fight," I said. He gave me a sad smile. "You don't belong in the crossfire." "I do now," I said. "I chose this." The next few days were chaos. Meetings turned hostile. Executives who once praised Lucien's leadership began to question his decisions in coded language. Lack of transparency, emotional influence, compromised decision-making. They never said my name, but I could hear the accusation in every syllable. I became invisible in meetings again. Not because I was forgotten, but because I was too dangerous to be acknowledged. Lucien started losing votes, slowly, strategically, a drip campaign designed to bleed him out. And the worst part, he wouldn't fight dirty. "If I lose," he told me one night, "I lose with integrity, but they're using lies." I argued, "And I won't play their game," he said, "because if I become like them to win, then I've already lost." That was the night I made a decision. If he wouldn't fight for himself, I would. I started gathering information, quietly, strategically. I reviewed every board member's record, every deal, every speech. I looked for cracks, and I found one. A man named Everett Langston, senior board member, old money, always smiled like he had a knife tucked behind his back. And he had secrets, financial ones, misreported holdings, a silent conflict of interest with a company we were negotiating with. I didn't go to Lucien. I went to Everett directly. I met him in his private club. The kind of place that smelled like cigars and male arrogance. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Collins," he said. "So are you," I replied, and slid the file across the table. "You think this is leverage?" He laughed. "No," I said, "it's mercy. If I wanted this to go public, it would already be in the Times. I'm giving you an out." He studied me. "What do you want?" "Vote confidence," I said. "Lucien stays." He laughed again. "And what do you get out of this?" I leaned forward. "I get to watch you squirm every time you shake his hand." I left without another word. 3 days later, the board voted, 6-5. Lucien stayed. No one ever asked how. But he looked at me across the conference room table that day. And I saw it in his eyes. He knew. That night, we didn't talk about the vote, or Everett, or what it cost me to play the game he wouldn't touch. We just lay on the couch, his head in my lap, my fingers in his hair. "You saved me," he whispered. "No," I said, "you saved yourself. I just reminded you how." The peace that followed wasn't loud. It wasn't triumphant. It was quiet, earned. The company stabilized. The press moved on. The whispers died down. And for the first time, we had space to be normal as we could be. He started talking about the future, about stepping back, about building something smaller, slower, more human. What would you do? I asked one night, if you weren't CEO anymore. He smiled. Something with my hands. Something real. You mean like woodworking? Maybe. Or maybe I'll open a bookstore and refuse to sell anything written after 1960. You'd go broke in a week. Then I'll marry rich, he said, smirking. I laughed. And then he went quiet. I mean it, he said. I want that with you. Not just the fight, not just the fire, but the peace too. I want a life. My heart twisted. I do too. A month later, we flew to Italy. Just us. No headlines. No scandals. He rented a stone cottage in Tuscany with views that made you forget the rest of the world even existed. One night, under 100 lanterns, he knelt in the grass and pulled out a ring. You walked into my life like a spark in a dark room, he said, and you never asked me to change. You just reminded me I could. So I'm asking you now, Aria Collins, will you be my fire for the rest of my life? I couldn't speak. I just nodded as tears streamed down my face. And then I said the word that would change everything. Yes. We didn't post photos. We didn't throw a press conference. We just lived, for once, in the light. I used to believe that love meant fireworks. Something loud, overwhelming, undeniable. But after everything we'd been through, scandals, betrayals, power struggles, and whispered wars, I realized love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet that comes after. The moment when the storm clears. And two people are still standing. Still holding hands. After we returned from the vineyard, everything felt different, not in a dramatic way. The world didn't magically turn soft. The news didn't stop spinning stories. And my insecurities didn't vanish overnight. But something inside me had changed. I had said yes, not just to Lucien, but to the chaos, the legacy, the man behind the empire, and to the version of myself I'd become because of him. And more importantly, he said yes to me, not as an accessory, not as a woman he needed to fix or protect, but as his equal. That morning, we woke up in our apartment, sunlight spilling through the windows. Coffee already brewing, the world still asleep. He looked over at me, hair tousled, face half buried in a pillow, and whispered, "How does it feel?" I smiled, like I finally exhaled after years of holding my breath. He reached out, brushing my cheek. "You're free now." "No," I corrected him gently. "We're free." The weeks that followed were quiet in the best way. Lucien started delegating more, stepping back from daily operations. The board resisted, of course. Evelyn was furious, but he made it clear he had nothing to prove anymore. The kingdom would stand, with or without his iron grip on it. As for me, I finally did something I never thought I would. I quit my job. Not because I was giving up, and definitely not because I was becoming someone's wife. I left because it was time to build something that was mine. I rented a tiny, sunlit office above a bookstore in Soho. I called it Aria Strategy, a consulting firm for startups run by women and minorities who'd never had access to the kinds of boardrooms I'd once been invisible in. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't built on billions. But it was mine. Lucien helped set up the legal side. Then he stepped back, watched me sign my first contract, and whispered in my ear, "That's what power looks like." We still had our battles. There were days I questioned everything, my voice, my choices, my right to stand next to a man who had once ruled the skyline. There were days he questioned his legacy, whether stepping back meant giving up, whether choosing a simpler life made him look weak. But every time we doubted, we returned to the same place, each other, and slowly, that became enough. One rainy night, months after our wedding, I found Lucien standing barefoot in the kitchen, staring at a pot of boiling water like it held the answers to the universe. "You okay?" I asked. He looked up. "I want to sell the penthouse." I blinked. What? He shrugged. It doesn't feel like us anymore. It never really did. I walked over, slipped my arms around his waist. Then where do you want to go? He leaned his forehead against mine. Somewhere we can hear the trees again. We moved 2 months later. A house. In the Hudson Valley. It had creaky floors, too many windows, and no elevator, but it had space, for breath, for new beginnings, for quiet. Lucien built a shed in the backyard and called it a writing room. Though he mostly drank tea in there and stared at birds. I turned our spare bedroom into a client lounge, warm, inviting, filled with photos of women changing their corners of the world. We hosted small dinners, read by the fire. Sometimes we just sat on the porch in silence, listening to the wind move through the trees. It wasn't the life I thought I'd have. It was better, because it was real. One evening in October, we took a walk through the woods behind our house. The leaves were a riot of color: gold, crimson, fire orange. Lucien held my hand and said, "I used to think I had to earn peace." I looked at him, and now I know I just had to stop running from it. I squeezed his hand. He paused, then added, "I have one more surprise for you." "Oh no," I said. "You know how I feel about surprises." He grinned and pulled a small envelope from his coat pocket. I opened it. Inside was a deed to a small piece of land in Italy. "It's where we said yes," he said. "I bought it for us to build something, anything, one day." I stared at the paper, then at him. "I thought you were done with empires," I whispered. He touched my cheek. "Not done, just choosing the ones that matter." We didn't have everything figured out. There were still headlines, still judgment, still moments where I caught my reflection and wondered if the girl who used to file reports in a cubicle would recognize the woman staring back. But I never doubted the truth anymore. Not his love, not mine, and definitely not the life we built together. One quiet choice at a time. Because in the end, the real power wasn't in the boardroom, or the penthouse, or the name Grant carved into stone. The real power was this: a man who learned how to let go, a woman who learned how to rise, and a love that refused to be small. And that was the end of Aria and Lucien's story. A journey that started with power, pressure, and impossible choices, but ended with something stronger than any empire: love. Seen and chosen every single day. If their story moved you, reminded you of something you've lived or dreamed of, don't forget to like the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and share it with someone who still believes in quiet strength and real connection. This is Nhan Stories, where we tell tales of emotion, resilience, and healing. See you in the next story. And until then, stay kind, stay brave, and always stay true to your heart.